The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the 19.1 webinar. Thank you to all those who are joining us live. We currently have around 27 attendees. I'm sure that'll grow while we go. As usual, we'll be doing about a 20 to 30 minute walkthrough of the new functionality included as part of 19.1. At the end of the webinar, we're going to have some time for Q&A about any features. And of course, we encourage you to stick around and ask anything you want. To ask your questions, just post them into the webinar questions area. And at the end, we'll go through a list of questions and answer them for you. With this release, we've been doing lots of cleanup work and preparation for future enhancements. So we spent a lot of the time really just cleaning up the code base, but we certainly found some time to deliver some amazing new features. And so generally, I want us to get started generally with I guess the admin, actually no, I think this time I'm going to start with the teachers. I think there's a lot more exciting things in the teachers area. And so I'm going to start there, and we've really worked with the teachers to try and find ways to save them time and improve the accuracy of how they're using the platform. So let's get into it. So I'm going to share my screen, and I might just drop the webcam off as well. Okay, so looking at the system, one of the first things you'll notice is that we've improved the search bar up the top here. Now when you type in someone's name, it'll automatically start searching for that person. Now, if you don't know that person's name quite well, for example, you don't know the spelling, we've added fuzzy searching in there as well. So it'll still find matches even if you're not quite right on that name spelling. But what this is doing is quickly finding users, bringing them up for you, and you can click through directly to the person you're looking for. We found, doing some research on search, that the thing that people were using our search box for the most was actually looking for people. And so we wanted to make that the quickest and fastest thing you could possibly do with this search box. So now you'll find that just by typing in, you'll get some suggestions there. Obviously, if you're looking for a file or something else, that's still possible. So if I'm looking for something a bit more general, I can just press enter and it will go and do the traditional search, and that will still be there as well. So the old search is still there, but there's just this shortcut if you're looking for a particular user. Also, while I'm talking about search, and looking at search, we have also done a lot of work to optimize the Pastoral system. So for those users that were utilizing the Pastoral system a great deal, you're finding it was starting to get slower and slower as you built up more and more records. As of this update, Pastoral will be super fast. We've enhanced the usability here and increased the speed, so you won't find that slowdown happening anymore in this page. So this should be back to being full speed. Now, this was only impacting schools that had hundreds of records per student, but as the system grows and is used more over time, more and more people are coming up against that slowdown. So it's important to speed this up again. Logging in just quickly as a teacher, just to have a look at some teacher functionality. One of the things that we've done for this release is we've added the ability to mark double classes. So here on my timetable, we can see that we have two classes, 9A French, over 2 periods. This is what we call a double. Previously, you'd have to mark the attendance for both of those periods. Now we've simplified that, so you can actually mark the attendance just for the single class. Now, obviously, I should say this is a synergetic only function, so this is only for our synergetic users, but it should make marking the roll a bit faster for teachers if they have doubles and they've got synergetic as well. All right, moving on. Let's create some due work in a class and have a look at what goes on through the due work process now. So I'm just going to add the due work component. Obviously, for most people, they'd be doing it through a course these days, but I'm going to do it the basic way. So first up, when I create a new due work, you'll notice that there's now a new option called Similarity Check. Now, this was previously called plagiarism scanning, and it was automatically turned on for every assessment item. So for every due work you created, this was always on. Now we have the option to turn it on or off. It's off by default. If you want to check for similarity, you can just enable that. Obviously, you need to have submissions on as well, otherwise there's not going to be nothing to check. Once submissions are on, you can turn Similarity Check on and it will start scanning that work for similarity. Now, it's important to talk about this name change of plagiarism scan to Similarity Check. We were finding a lot of people were under the belief that it was actually detecting plagiarism, and that's just not what it was doing. What it was actually doing was comparing documents and finding similarities between them. So we just wanted to clarify that terminology throughout the system so that it makes more sense. So now, wherever you see or did see a plagiarism score, you'll now see a similarity score. Just makes it a bit clearer what we're actually doing here. We're actually finding similarities between other documents, not necessarily detecting plagiarism. To detect plagiarism, obviously a teacher's going to have a look at it and decide who this was copied of, whether that's okay to copy off them or not, whether it was a citation or not. All of those sort of things need to come in to actually determine plagiarism. So just to avoid that confusion, we've simplified the language to similarity. Okay, let's have a look at a class here, and I'm going to have a look at perhaps creating a new assessment item here and populating that assessment with marks and going through that process. Just quickly, I just want to show you some workflow enhancements in this process. So here I'm going to call this no submissions. We'll do a percentage mark, just a standard assessment item. Now, when I go to view the status of this screen, I've actually got a new feature here. The new feature is import feedback. Now, we had a request on the forums that teachers would often like to bring data in from an external source. So they want to copy and paste into this screen, populating all the students' marks in one copy and paste action. Obviously, you could paste into each field individually, one by one previously, take a bit of time to go through them all, but we want to make that a bit faster. So the import feedback dialog allows you to quickly paste all of your data in and select what you're importing and import that into the system. Let's just have a look at how that might work, just to give you an idea. I'm going to start by exporting the markbook. As you know, that's a feature that we've already got in the system. And so I can actually export all of this data. Might need a class with actual mark data in it. Let's go to 9A English. Get some mark data. So here we've got some mark data and assessments, and we want to take that data and export it to a CSV. So I've now got all of my data in a spreadsheet, and I can obviously work on that and look at it. See if I can get that on the screen. So here we can see all of the mark data that we've got in there. Let's bring that off the screen for a second. Okay. Now, going back to my class here, I'm going to create that assessment item, and I'm going to quickly import mark data into that. So we're just going to create a new work item. Well, there it was. Already done that. View status. Import feedback. And now I can actually copy the data from the spreadsheet. Paste it into this field. And there you can see all of the data being copied and pasted in. It's actually not quite what I wanted. No, not going to do what I want. See if that works. Okay, that's better. So now what's happened here is I've pasted in the ID of the student, the mark, and the comment as well. So I'm going to select this option here, import all of that data, click import. And you can see here it's imported the data. Hasn't done it all. Should actually wait for that to happen. And of course, I've got some bugs, but you can see there it's brought in some of the data. We'll try it with some other data. Copy and paste this information, import it. So obviously when you import the data, you've got to make sure that it comes in correctly. And make sure that all populates. I will eventually get this in. This is why I've always been hesitant to add a feature like this, because it is a bit hard to get this data correct and get it all in. I've actually got the wrong student IDs, which doesn't help. So anyway, that feature will populate all of the data into the class, set up all of the work set up all the feedback, the comments, the marks, and do it all. Now, the reason this feature is really important, once you have the data in the right format, of course, once you get the data imported correctly, the reason this is really that important is that it's going to allow us to import all sorts of data sets into the system. So from here, you'll be able to import things like NAPLAN data, PAT testing, all sorts of different sources of information. If you might have done exams, you might have done, you might have calculated data in the spreadsheet and used that to inform your mark. So all of those different locations will be possible to be just brought straight in and populated directly into your mark book. And then, of course, once you've brought that mark in, you'll be able to share it with the students and publish it directly to them. So that will come directly through to the student and the parent. So you can imagine using this to publish your exam results or NAPLAN data. Just finally, I should mention that this feature was actually sponsored and developed for Mazenod. So thank you, Ashley, for sponsoring this feature. That's part of what we do around here. We obviously listen to our customers. They have a feature that they really need and is necessary for their rollout. We go ahead and build that for them. So that was a custom build, but obviously it's a useful feature for everyone as well. All right. One of the other things about that, which I should mention while we're here, is once that mark data is actually published into the system, and I've got myself in a right mess now with it all over the place, and I go to the mark book, we're actually able to see that some of these assessments are now from here in a pending state. So you can see this assessment item here where I published that mark data to that student. It's actually now in a draft state. So we've added indicators to the mark book to show you when there is marks that haven't been fully published to the students. So if whenever you're looking at a mark book and you see the triangle in the corner, mousing over it will tell you that that's an unpublished draft. So there is a mark there, it just hasn't been published yet. As a final thing, just to quickly look at we have improved the look of our rubrics. So the rubrics in the system, when we were looking at them, it's not where I wanted to go. All right, let's go back. When we're looking at it from a student's perspective or a parent's perspective, the rubric on a full big screen like this was quite, looked quite good. It laid out pretty well and it was easy to understand. However, when you were looking at it on a mobile device, it became quite difficult to look at. So if I just resize this screen down just quickly and show you what would happen, as we get down to smaller and smaller screens, you can see now that we've relaid out this rubric, and it now has a sort of a hierarchy to it. The capabilities will be in bigger text, the indicators will be in slightly smaller text, and then the descriptors will be in smaller text again. All of this has been indented so that you can see the full hierarchy of that information. So we've tried to make it as easy as possible. So when you're on a mobile device, you will actually still be able to understand what's going on in the rubric. We know it's not perfect, but that is the limitations of the screen size that we're using on a mobile phone. We hope that this improves the experience of parents who are looking at these rubrics. It should make it a lot clearer what's going on. Previously, it didn't quite convey the hierarchy of information that was being presented. Okay. Moving on from teachers, let's get into probably the most important feature of this release. This is probably the feature that we spent most time on working throughout this release. And with this feature, we really wanted to merge the due work calendar and the school calendar into one unified view. Now, to do that, we knew we were dealing with a huge amount of information, all of the class, all the assessments across the whole school, all of the school events all across the school was going to be a huge amount of information and most likely wasn't going to be relevant to everyone. So we wanted to build a system that would capture that information and show just the bits of information that you needed to be able to make a better decision about when assessments should be set, when events can be set, and how to plan the collisions better between those two sets of events. So let's have a look at what we've built for the assessment calendar. So with the assessment calendar, we have created a system that allows us to visualize a full semester worth of events. So here we can see a semester worth of events. We can see class assessments, and we can also see school events as well on the same calendar for that whole semester. We can see where class assessments are all being grouped together by seeing a number count here of the number of assessments on a single day, and we can drill down to obviously see all of those assessments that have been set for that individual day. Of course, this is going to have a lot of information when you first arrive, but we're expecting this to be filtered to the type of information that's relevant to you. As an example, we've got the ability to filter it to my classes or any class for that matter. So you can filter it just to your list of classes, showing only the classes that are relevant to you. You might instead be a faculty leader. You might want to look at it from a course perspective. So you might be interested in the French courses, and so you can filter it down to the French course and only show assessments that are relevant to that French course. On top of that, we're able to filter on type, so you can filter out tasks and other things that may not be as relevant and just look at due work or major assessments. If you're a head of school, you may be interested in year level, so you can filter on a year level and only show assessments for a particular year level. So you'll be able to filter to exactly the thing that you're interested in. Obviously, not all collisions are created equal. So when you're looking for collisions, you're really only interested in collisions that happen for a certain group of people. There's no point looking for collisions between an assessment in junior school and an event in the senior school. They're just not going to clash. So we wanted to build a filtering system that would allow you to I guess, reduce the set down just to the relevant area of the school that you're interested in. I don't have them here now, but they're coming in the next couple of days. There's going to be two additional filters here, campus and event type. Campus will allow you to filter the events to campus level, and event type will allow you to filter the event types that are shown here as well. On top of this, I've got some other views. So we've got semester view here, but of course we can drill down into the traditional month view and see the data at a month level, and see what's on at a month level, seeing all the events. And of course, if we want to go even further, we can drill down into the week view and have a look at it, what's happening on a week-by-week basis as well. So you can drill down and see a more detailed resolution if you choose. But that semester oversight gives you a really good picture. Just for those that are wondering, I'm seeing a full year here. I've got a full year defined semester For most schools, they're probably not going to have a full year defined as their semester. That is a choice that you make, obviously, how long your semester's terms are. But in my demo data, I've defined it for a whole year. But that's configurable by you. So if you want your semesters to be just a term, that's fine. If you want them to be half a year, that's fine. If you want them to be the whole year, that's also fine. It just controls what level of visibility we see at any one time in the system. Okay, what's up next in my list of features to look at? News statistics. So next up, we have the news statistics. Now, we've been working on news for some time now. At the start of the year, we launched the new news system, and we've continued to enhance the system over that time. We've added comments and refined the audiencing system. And now we're introducing a new feature. I'll need to be an admin to see this, where you're now able to see the statistics of news. So if you're an author, a moderator, a super user, you can see the statistics of any news item that obviously you're related to. You just go into the news detail page, you press the statistics button, and then you open up the statistics. Wasn't the statistics I was hoping for. Let's get an event with a bit more information. This one here, it's got a bit more statistics in it. And just so you're aware, we've actually been capturing your statistics data for some time now. So we actually already have this data in your system. So when we launch this feature, you can go back and look at historical articles and see the statistics in there for them as well. So this isn't just going to be from going forward. When this launches, you'll actually be able to see statistics for articles that have been in the system for some time. We've been capturing this data for a bit of time. We just didn't have a visibility of it. Now we have visibility. So just going quickly through what's happening here, obviously when it was first opened, how many times it's been opened in total, how many comments were being made, how many times it's been saved for later. When we look at this graph, we've got different scales that we can look at. So we can have a look at it by day, by month, or by hours. If we look at it by hours, we can go right down to the very fine detail here. Obviously, I'm looking at it for quite a period of time, but you can always select an area and zoom in, and that allows you to zoom the resolution and see more detail. So now I'm looking just for the first day this was posted, each hour that people were able to visit and see the information. And I can see for each role type who's accessed it and when, and how many people in that hour. Okay. So lots of capabilities there to have a look and see how that article has gone out. Next up, we've got how they access the article. So we know that you're interested in where people are coming from when they're accessing the article. So this will show you what way people access this article. Did they access it via the dashboard, via an email, via an email notification? Did they come via a homepage, the feed, the search, saved results? All of those options are here. So you can see where people are coming from, how they're accessing this article. In this particular case, almost everyone accessed it via email. So we know that this has gone out as a notification, and all of these people have clicked on that notification and come in and viewed that article via the email. So we know that communication method is working well to engage people with this article. So it's an interesting stat to see where people are coming from. We have some more data we're collecting that we'll probably expose over time. We're going to be looking at audience reach next. So that's probably our next feature for this, is to look at what level of your audience you actually reached. So if you just posted this to a class page, what percentage of your class has read the news? If you posted it to all the parents, how many parents have read it? So we're going to be doing a bit more work to show you exactly what your reach was for this article in terms of your audiencing. That's up next for this feature. But this is a good starting point. Give you the data that you've sort of been asking for. How many people have opened it, read it, how did they get here, when did they access it, how long has it been active for? All of those sort of things should be clarified through this stats page. Okay. So let's wrap up and head on into the admin system. So As we sort of get towards the end of the webinar, I'd like to sort of just go over some of the admin features. Probably not as exciting, but useful nonetheless just to talk about. Now, first up, as we sort of begin to support more cloud-based SIS systems, so we're looking to support systems where the SIS is in the cloud, Schoolbox is in the cloud, and there's no on-premise infrastructure. Now, I know for a lot of our customers that's not what they've got currently, but that's where I think the market is heading, and so we're looking to support that marketplace. And a lot of our SIS partners are also along with us on that journey. So we've been working recently with ISAMS, Central, TAS, KMAR, and all of these systems are using APIs for their cloud-to-cloud communication. So we're going to be developing API-based integrations that will, I guess, take that data from the SIS system and bring it into Schoolbox. Now, before that work could all commence, we needed to really enhance our, I guess, SIS Data Store, the place where we are going to store all of that SIS data inside Schoolbox. For those that have been with us for a long time, you know that we've relied very heavily on real-time integrations, which meant we hadn't had to store a lot of SIS data. We were able to simply get that data in real time and display it on the screen. But with cloud-based integrations, that's not going to be really a feasible solution going forward. Those real-time connections just aren't fast enough. So we'll be storing that data locally. We've done a lot of work with this release to enhance our local data store, and that means some changes to how Schoolbox data will be, or school SIS data is going to be imported into Schoolbox. For those that have been using our Schoolbox connector and been importing their data, what that means for you is that there's now a new user profile section. This is where you'll be able to load user data into Schoolbox, so staff, student, parents, and relationships will all be loaded into Schoolbox, and that will house all of that data, SIS data about those users. Now, if you've been doing the CSV upload, that's fine. We also have some APIs for doing this as well. Those will all need to be reviewed and updated. So all your CSVs that you've been using to load templates, they'll need to be reviewed because we have changed our staff, student, parents layout. No longer are user profiles connected to the user CSV. This is now a separate CSV that only deals with user accounts. It no longer deals with profile information. Profile information is things like parent contact details, medical alerts, all the things that you sort of see on the profile screen. It's that extra information about the person. The other thing about this is it allows us to disconnect account creation from profile data. So once you've loaded this data, you can actually configure your UPS to load users from this data store. So that'll allow you to actually configure UPS on top of this data store. All of this is pointing towards the next stage of this development, which will be that we'll build importers for all of the major APIs, TAS, KMAR, Central, ISAMS. We've actually already built the ISAMS importer. They will all have importers, and they will import into this data store and populate this data store. So you will get all of the functionality that you get with a real-time connection, but by using an API in Schoolbox. And we'll be able to support all of that functionality that you previously got via the real-time connections via those API importers as well. So that's why all of this work is really important. But it really only impacts a small percentage of our users. But I do want to reiterate that for those small percentage of users that do import your data via CSV, it is worth having a look over the notes, just double checking these formats and making sure you're up to date. There might be opportunities to improve the quality of the data you get. We've added lots of new functionality, things like staff directories, parent directories are all supported now with this new system. So there's probably a few new capabilities that weren't available to you before. So we're happy to talk to you about those if you're interested in further questions about it. Sorry. Weather. That's something we haven't talked about for a while. So there was a question last webinar about the weather and what had happened to it. So for those that don't know, start of the year, the weather API that we were using started to stop working. And over time, it just basically turned off for everyone. So we went and found a new API source and rewrote the weather API. It's now built on a new API source. And as you can see here, it now includes things like a UV index and some other information. You can click through to see a weekly forecast. So that's all been updated for you. So you should be able to get all the information you need on the weather. We encourage you to put the widget back on your page if you've turned it off. It's got the UV index now, which is really useful for a lot of schools. I also should mention this will work for any place in the world. We've got full coverage all over the world with the weather API. So you can put it in any location. And finally, we've also updated the sports fixture integration with the weather API. So matches will also have their weather forecasts attached to them as well. So if you've got an upcoming match, you'll see the weather forecast for that date on the match page as well. Okay, moving on. Next up in the admin area, we've got some big upgrades to the UPS. Now, the UPS system has been around for quite some time, but there was always an issue with the logs. They were often difficult to read, they were large and unwieldy, and they were not exactly accurate all the time. So we've done a lot of work to improve the output of the UPS logs. Now these counts should be more accurate. And if I click into this log here, just to give you an idea, it now should be a lot more concise about what's actually happening. So we can see immediately that this student was skipped because the username cannot be null. Shows you what it would have done if the username was set. So you can see all of the actions of what has actually occurred. I think here probably the most important enhancement has been the changes to the display of what groups they're going to be added into. This previously wasn't working very well. Now you can see exactly when a user's been added to a new group and what permission they've been given to that group. If a user's been added to many groups, you'll see that change as well. So you'll be able to see the movement of users in and out of groups if you're using the dynamic groups feature, which is really helpful to be able to tell what's going to happen to your group memberships. So that should be a lot clearer now through this log. And as you can see, it's much more concise. We can scroll through it very easily and see everything that went on in this log. It doesn't have all the detail about what happened with each rule. We found that was just overkill, but it does tell you exactly what would happen. So it's fairly clear and concise now. One other thing that we found when we're looking at this was that we were using up lots of disk space. So the UPS logs were written every day that it ran. They were often megabytes and megabytes long because I said they were not very concise, and they were taking up lots of disk space. So as well as making them a lot smaller and a lot shorter, we've also cleaned them up. So now if there's a log more than a month old, it will automatically be deleted from the system. And so that won't take up any more disk space, and that disk space will be freed and given back to your server. Just a little bit of freed space. Now, that does lead me to my next point, which is I often get asked about disk space in these webinars and when are you going to give me my disk space back? And I've always talked about how hard a problem is. But what we've done with this release is we've actually developed a new feature that allows us to complete a hard delete. And it's actually the tool we use to delete these UPS logs, in fact. And what we've done is we now have, it's a support-only tool, but it does allow us to delete files on request. So if you've got a file that's really big and taking up a lot of disk space, you can request us to delete that file now. It'll be hard removed from everywhere. It will no longer be linked to anything. It will be gone and gone for good. So please think carefully before asking us to do that. So we've got one or two more little things to go. In the admin system, as we expand, I guess, our reach internationally, and we're starting to work with more schools around the world, we're developing more and more localization capabilities. So just a couple of little new localizations that are available in the system. We now have the ability to configure the days of the weekend. So if your weekend isn't Saturday, Sunday, it might be Friday, Saturday, for example. This can now be altered, so timetables will still render correctly, even though the weekend is on different days. And then finally, we've given the ability to change the spell checker language. So obviously we've got Australian here as our default, but there's new languages here. I know they're all English, but these will be extended as we go. In particular, USA is the one that most people are looking at, is having that alternative English spelling option available. So they're now in there as well. Just finally, just before we go to some questions, and I do encourage everyone to get your questions posted so we can go to them next. But just finally, just to wrap up, we do encourage everyone to have a look at the release notes over the next few weeks. There's going to be some really important notes in there about things that are changing, specifically schema changes to the database, but also API changes to some of our APIs. And I mentioned the upload of those CSVs in particular. So please do check the release notes and make sure that you're not impacted by any of those changes, and make sure you're prepared if you are impacted. So please do take some time to have a look at those. In terms of the timeline, in terms of what we're doing, we expect to release a beta at the end of this week that will roll out across the development servers automatically. So expect by early next week, all the development servers to have a beta version of 19.1 available for you to test and review. We expect that beta period to last approximately 2, maybe 3 weeks. Once that's complete, we will then be doing a final gold release and making that generally available. At that point in time, we'll send you an invite to book in and schedule your upgrade to that release. So once that's happening, we'll schedule that in. We'll set you a calendar invite to schedule that in. And finally, for the cloud customers who are in the cloud environment, that rollover will happen automatically. Generally, that happens another 3 weeks after we go gold. The cloud is then migrated to the gold release as well. So that'll happen automatically for our cloud customers. You don't need to worry about that. We'll take care of that upgrade for you automatically. So expect the timeline for the release, 2 weeks for beta, another 2 weeks for gold on cloud. So probably in about a month or 2, we should have this rolled out across the cloud environment for those customers. And we'd hopefully have a few customers booked in for their upgrades as well. We're currently just some stats on where we're at with 19. 19's been a really successful release, and thank you everyone for booking in your upgrades. We've had almost 80% of our customers are now running 19, which is a great success story for us. I can't say enough how important it is for everyone to be upgrading and running the latest code. There's so many bug fixes and so many enhancements that we do in each and every release that, holding out and staying back off that, it only impacts on your access to those fixes. So I can't encourage you enough to get involved, get booked in and schedule those upgrades in. We're going to have lots of holidays coming up soon over summer, so perhaps that's the window where 19.1 gets rolled out across the fleet. So we do encourage you to book that in as soon as you're ready to. Okay, let's go to some questions now. And I hope everyone's got their questions ready. So Jane Deacon asks, with the marksheet import, is the student ID the external TAS ID? And if so, does the export retain leading zeros? So 2 parts to that question. So firstly, yes, the student ID is your external SIS ID. So not just TAS, obviously, but any SIS, synergetic, or whatever SIS you're using, the ID that we're using to marry the data up when you copy and paste it into that import will be your external SIS ID. It won't be an internal Schoolbox ID. No one really knows the internal Schoolbox ID. We use the external SIS ID, the SIS identifier, as our main key for that data, and we expect you would as well. You'll find when you export a spreadsheet from Schoolbox, a markbook export, it will contain that TAS ID or the synergetic ID in it already. So you'll be able to export and then import back in again using that ID. Finally, does the export retain leading zeros? Now, this is an issue, of course, with Excel around whether it strips, treats the integer as an int or whether it treats it as a string. That's going to be functionally controlled by your spreadsheet program. Schoolbox will just accept whatever you paste in. I know that there will probably be problems with zeros being stripped by spreadsheets. There's not a lot we can do about that, unfortunately. That'll come down to how the spreadsheet's configured. So that will need to be something you might need to think about in training your users how to manage those retaining zeros. Having said that, I'm not sure that those retaining zeros are that important, but it'll be something to test out, I'm sure. So just have a look at that. It may need a bit of closer examination. I'm not entirely confident I can give a good answer on that at the moment. Next question. David asks, can capabilities and indicators be grouped by default in the rubric markbook instead of having to filter one at a time? Yes and no. So capabilities and indicators can be grouped, and they are grouped. Obviously, capabilities are the groupings of indicators. I think what you're asking here is more, can they be sorted? And I sort of think I understand what you mean. At the moment, no. You can't sort the capabilities and indicators, but you certainly can filter them. And what that allows you to do is filter a capability and then see only the assessments that have got that capability. I haven't really gone into the rubric markup today, so I might take that one offline. But yeah, I don't think we can at the moment sort by capabilities or indicators, nor do I think it might be that useful. So we might need to have a chat offline about that question. Next up, I got a question from Jane Deacon. Is the calendar view, is there still the list view? That's eagle eye, Jane, to notice that there was no list view on the calendar. Yeah, we have actually lost the list view. It will be coming back just in this beta alpha at the stage at the moment. It has dropped off. We've noticed that ourselves, and we've got a job to bring that back. So the list view will be coming back. I should mention that while I'm here, one of the reasons that's dropped off is that in order to do the new assessment calendar, we actually updated all of our calendars across the system. So the whole calendar platform has been rewritten, and you should notice a few visual changes and improvements. It is a big upgrade across the entire all the calendars in Schoolbox, not just the assessment calendar. So there has been a few tweaks here and there. So you should notice a few little bits and pieces. I do intend to have the list view coming back in the future, so don't worry about that just yet. We hopefully have that back during the beta period. James asks, new statistics, does it show views from the Digistorm app? It's a good question, James. Currently, we haven't asked Digistorm to update their app to provide us with information about the fact that the link back to them to ask them to integrate. But yeah, at the moment, we don't have that. So yeah, we've just got to probably give that feedback to Digistorm, because it really is up to them to tell us that it's come from them. Okay, next up, Jane asks, can the news stats show which specific user has opened and read the item? Yeah, Jane, that's a good question, and that was sort of goes to the thing that I mentioned earlier about audience reach, and that's really going to be the next thing that we focus on with the news stats is looking at, okay, who did you address this article to? What percentage of those users have read the article, and which users haven't? So being able to show the breakdown of what users did or didn't read it based on your audience. So that's going to be the next function we do for the stats. But currently that's not possible, but we do intend to add that down the track. Sean asks, is the news API in the release? So for those that don't know, we've gone with an API first paradigm throughout the system. So we have APIs for almost all of the new features that we're developing. A lot of them are based on the idea that there's a JSON API for all the actions, create, update, delete. Both news and comments have got full APIs. The issue, however, is authentication of those APIs. Currently, we don't have a way for third-party applications to authenticate to utilize those APIs. And that's going to be something we need to develop before we release those APIs. You can certainly use those APIs, but you'll have to use them as a user in the system, which we don't think is really the perfect way to sort of build an integration. Because if you go and delete that user or you change that user's permissions,
it's going to break your API integration. So really we need to develop a separate authentication system for APIs before we can launch a proper API system for everyone to start using. But we have been building out the APIs. So it's not that they're not there, it's just that we don't have a really good way for you to start to utilize them. So they are there. You can use them if you want, but it's buyer beware, and I think that you should wait a while till we build a proper authentication system to use those APIs against. Okay, Wade asks, can you still see the original UPS logs to see the rules at work? No, sorry, Wade. Those original UPS logs with all of the detail, the debug data about the rules and how they were working. We actually no longer logging that, and we had to do that because we're actually in bigger schools. We're actually running up against limits on file size and causing a whole lot of issues with loading the logs and not being able to view them. They were just too hard for people to open in a browser. They were taking up too much memory and causing all sorts of issues. So we actually had to remove that data. So unfortunately, we can't still provide it because it just was too much to render. So unfortunately, that data is no longer visible. If you've got a good use case for it, or you think there's something that we might need to extend or add into the logs, please let us know. I'm more than happy to get feedback on what you might be missing. But I think we've got a good middle ground here where we show the outcome of the rules. So we show what the rules will do. We might not show how the rules did the work, but we at least show how the rules will work. We think there's still a bit more work to do with UPS transparency, so we're keen to hear feedback on what we might do to improve those logs in the future. But yeah, at the moment, all that debug data we had to remove. Okay, Wade asks, will there be a setting for us to set our own time period for log deletion? No, at the moment that's hard-coded to 1 month. We sort of sat on that for a while, but I think 1 month is a good middle ground. Anything that's happened over a month ago, you're probably not really that interested in. So you will have the last 30 days of runs available. Of course, there are other ways to see logs as well. But yeah, for the actual UPS logs, we're going to keep them for a month. But if there's feedback on that, if that's not long enough or it's too long, please let us know. We'd be happy to take feedback on that as well. Wade asks, do we still get the weather API key from Wonderground? No. So the new API key is from a company called WeatherStack. So WeatherStack is providing the API key, and you don't actually have to worry about it anymore. We've negotiated a API key for all schools, so no longer do you have to manage your weather API at all. We've got a key for everyone. So this data will be automatically done. There's no need to worry about any keys. The Weather Underground, I don't know if you know this, but Weather Underground stopped providing their API. So you no longer need to worry about it. Just turn on the weather widget and it'll just work for you. Laura asks, Similarity Check can default be set as on rather than off? So at the moment I've defaulted it to off, and there's a couple of reasons for that. I'll just quickly go over why we chose to go with default to off. But firstly, I should mention that all existing assessments in the system will have it defaulted to on, because any assessment that was created before this update was created with Similarity Check on, and so it will be on for every assessment that was created before today. Now that includes anything in a course, anywhere in the system where any assessment's been created previously, it will be on. So it's going to be on for the vast majority of assessments anyway. Now, in terms of why we've gone with the default to off, and this talks to a lot of our forms in general. Generally, we like to progressively enhance a function rather than to progressively de-hance it. And the reason for that is that we want users to actively engage with features and enhance their functionality when they choose, rather than the other way around. And it sort of works in that the more complexity you put into the system, if you turn all of the complexity on and people don't want it, it's overwhelming. But if people opt into that complexity and decide they want it, then it's easier for them to decide that they want it. The other side of it is there's a usage charge to all of these plagiarism scans, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't being charged for all the usage of plagiarism checks or similarity checks when people didn't actually want it. So we also wanted schools to choose and opt into it rather than to just have it set always and just forget about it. So we actually want people to actually think about whether they need this and whether they want this function. It's an important question to ask. Okay, I think that comes to the end of my questions. I don't have any more questions. Thank you, everyone, for participating and asking all your questions. It was good to have all of the feedback. If there's any more discussions that you want, we can... I've got a couple of last-minute questions. All right. So Megan asks, how does the plagiarism scanner manage templates, e.g. if all of the students use the same template, is it recognized? It's a good question, Megan. So one of the reasons I did make it opt-in was looking at SIDA's data. SIDA's using the plagiarism scanner quite heavily for a lot of documents, and from looking at it, it's not really relevant in a lot of those cases because they are templates, and it was picking up a lot of duplicate data just because they were filling out forms and things like that. And so that really drove home the use case for making it an option. When we saw that it was, it was probably not even providing useful information because it was just picking up that half the document was copied because it was a template. And so that's really goes to the heart of why we made this an option, is that we wanted it to be, if it is something that you don't think plagiarism scanning is going to be useful for, if it's not something you actively want to use, we don't think it adds value if it's there. In the past, we thought it didn't harm if it was there. Now we want people to actually actively think that it's going to add value. So it's a slightly different way of thinking about it. But yeah, thanks for asking that question, Megan, because we did notice in CEDA that it was pulling up some, I guess, inaccurate data. Okay, that about wraps it up from me. Thank you, everyone, for coming along and participating. We will obviously have some release notes being posted shortly to our help site. We do encourage you to get online and discuss and get, we've got the new comments feature now, so when we announce those things, get in the comments, give us feedback. We're always happy to hear your feedback on features, what you think we've done, how you should change them. I think the release notes are now currently live. I'm just being updated as, so they're probably now up and ready to go. So if we just have a look at help, yep, so now we've got those release notes up, so please go check them out. We'll post a news post, and if you want to get engaged and comment on that, please give us your feedback. And of course, any issues during the beta, let us know. We want to hear as much as possible and get on it as top of it as quickly as possible so we can fix it before we go gold. So we're ready and waiting for any feedback you have and ready to make changes and fix bugs that you discover while testing. So thank you very much for your support, and I guess I'll be seeing a lot of you soon because I'll be going to a few of the meetups that are coming up. I do encourage everyone, if you want to touch base with us, to come along to the meetups. They're a great opportunity to have a conversation in person. So I'll be at a few of those over the next few months. So I'll see you all very soon. Goodbye.